Okay,
Well,
Laura.
thanks. Welcome, everyone, and good afternoon. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar. The webinar is brought to you by University of Illinois Extension, as well as Rural Partners, Illinois Rural Development Council. My name is Laura Hep-Kessel. I'm the Director of Telehealth Services for the SIU School of Medicine, but I also serve as the Chair of the Board of Directors for Rural Partners. So we're glad you're here with us today. There are a few housekeeping details I'd like to share. Because we have so many on the line, please mute your mic and stop your video during the presentation. If you have questions or comments, please use the chat space. We will be monitoring those. Pam might address those as she goes, but I definitely will bring those up in Q&A at the end if they haven't been addressed. If you're having any audio difficulty, you can post those questions in the chat space and someone from Extension will provide some technical assistance. The webinar will be recorded and will be available later on the local government education website. So for those of you that registered in advance, you'll get an email with the PowerPoint slides from today, as well as a link to the recording when it's been made available. So again, I wanted to thank Extension for partnering with Rural Partners on this webinar series. Just to quickly tell you a little bit about Rural Partners. We're the state's Rural Development Council. We're membership driven. We have a volunteer working board. We're always interested in new members, so I will post a link in the website about Rural Partners in case you're interested in learning more. Feel free to reach out, and we'll go ahead and get started with today's webinar. So now I would like to introduce Pam Schallhorn. Pam is an extension specialist in community and economic development with the University of Illinois Extension. She has spent the last 6 years studying what prompts people, especially young adults between the ages of 20 and 40, to return or remain in rural communities. Pam has also assisted several rural communities in conducting their own research by developing survey instruments and holding focus groups. Before coming to Extension, Pam was a commercial lender for over 2 decades, as well as director of the Small Business Development Center in Rockford, Illinois. She holds a master's degree in political studies and a bachelor's degree in finance. So thank you, Pam, for being with us today, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and welcome, everyone. I really appreciate all of you coming. It's been sort of a challenge to do all of this via Zoom, and unfortunately, we miss out a little bit on this program. I was telling someone just before we started that I generally hold a millennial panel at the end, reaching out to the millennials that are in the audience and allowing them to have some opportunity to answer questions from the older generations in the room. I will begin giving live presentations again, or in-person presentations again, the end of July. So although I may mention this at the end, if anyone is interested in me providing this program for their organization or county, please feel free to email me, and my email, maybe I can put that in the chat box a little bit later, but please feel free to contact me. Just a quick bit of background before we get started on where this program came from. And I noticed that Linda Trigresser is on the phone or on the call today, the Zoom meeting today, and I'm glad she's here. She actually invited me to become a part of the Washington County Planning Committee back in 2015. It's been almost 6 years now. And one of the people on that committee, one of the county board members, indicated that he was concerned about this exodus of young people and how it could be reversed, how they could start to try to attract people back into their community, young people back into their community. So from that request to this program, there's been a lot of research done. I want to thank Craig Schroeder. He is in the resources you'll see, but he did 40,000 plus surveys of millennials back in 2014. And a lot of the information that came from that was the original structure of this program. Although since then, you'll see another 28 resources at the end of the programming. And also I've helped counties deliver millennial surveys and also focus groups. And as I mentioned, these millennial panels. Throughout this program, I want you to understand in no way, shape, or form am I trying to discriminate against older generations. This is just something that you're going to see the problem. You're going to see why we need to do some of these things differently in our rural counties across Illinois, across the Midwest, across the United States, if we're going to build up that working age population. So just to let you know, though, that I have no intentions of discriminating. It's just coming up with some strategies that communities can use. So what's the problem? I think many of you know Dr. Chris Merritt. He's the director of the Illinois Institute for Rural Affairs at Western Illinois University. A couple of years ago, I listened to one of his presentations, and this was his quote. To him, the most important issue for rural communities in the state of Illinois as a whole is the depopulation represented by young people. Well, while we're out there, and I know, some of you, it's nice to try to get a little bit involved with these while we're doing these Zoom presentations. So this is what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm not going to put you in breakout rooms. There's really too many of you today, but what I want you to think about is this question, and then use the chat box. I'm going to clear my chat box out so I know where to start here. I want to see these as they come up. Use the chat box to answer this question. What issues for communities, regions, and states come with not having enough work age adults? And the definition of work age adults is 20 to 54, although I focus a lot on millennials and a little bit on Gen Zers, but there's not a lot of research out there. So, but for right now, answer this question, if you would, for me. What issues for communities, regions, and states come with not having enough working age adults? Let's see, we got one in the chat. Oh, let's learn more. Come on, everybody out there, think about this for just a minute. Here we go. We have a smaller tax base, not enough workforce, lack of workforce. Yes, I think we're all dealing with that right now. It affects everything: less tax revenue, higher commuter times, closed businesses, low school census. Yes, affordable housing options. Wow. Okay, you guys, you're waking up now. I'm loving it. Lack of social networking and young community. Insufficient elder care. I really like that one. I missed who put it up there. Hope for the future of options of jobs, community, and quality of life. But when we're talking about older generations, last week, I think it was last week, Nancy, that you had someone doing a age-friendly webinar. And one of the first things the presenter talked about is how older adults would like to, the majority of them would like to age in place. But how do we do that if we don't have healthcare workers, doctors? How do we attract businesses if we don't have those working age adults? So I really appreciate your interactions. These are great. Lack of people looking to the future and adopting new ideas and technology, and decrease political, actually it's decreased every kind of capital, political capital, social capital, you name it. Without these younger people, without them being in our communities, our rural communities, it's really going to be tough to navigate things in the future. Okay, so what is the problem? And I'm doing this because I want, especially county officials, city officials in rural areas and others, it's important to understand what's in the numbers. And I presented this in Centralia back in about, I think it was 2015 or 16. And what I did is I went in and I looked at the numbers. Now, the community knew that they had lost 7.5% of their population. It dropped from 14,126 down to 13,034. And I'm just going to side note this real quickly. You can read this along the bottom of your screen, but most of you know that your prison populations are included in the census data as though those people are living, well, they are living in your community, but they are not part of your working age adults. They're not available to work, obviously. So I actually took 90% of the current institutional population out of this analysis and assume that about 90% of people that are in the prisons are between the ages of 20 and 54. So these numbers have been adjusted for that, but that doesn't skew, so we don't skew these percentages. So for instance, Centralia knew they'd lost 7.5% of their population. They were concerned. But when I dug down into the numbers, and all these numbers come from census data, I found out that between 2000 and 2010, the population between 35 and 44 was 2,063 in 2000, but only 1,392 in 2010. That meant that they had a migration or a reduction of 32.5% of a good portion of their working age adults. This is huge. This has a real impact. In fact, it wasn't, excuse me, I went too quickly. It wasn't until the mayor of Salem and I were talking in 2016, there had actually been a company who wanted to expand in Salem and add about 250 new jobs, manufacturing jobs. But after they did an analysis of the region, they realized that they were not going to be able to attract enough workers to meet that minimum number of jobs that they were going to add. And so the company did not do the expansion. So companies that you're trying to attract to your communities are well aware of this data. And we've got some new data coming out in September. I think it's supposed to be out by September 1st, fingers crossed. And we're going to take a look at that. And right now, experts, for the most part, are expecting the same trends. So that makes this program and some of these strategies, these research-based strategies that we've come up with, even more important. Now, I'm not expecting you to do all these strategies, but at least take a look at a few of them. Okay. I also did this in the same analysis in Northwest Illinois when I gave a presentation in 2018. And you notice, for instance, Carroll County lost 21.83% of their 20 to 54-year-old working age adults between 2000 and 2017. And I won't go through the whole list, but you can see what kind of an impact and how important it is for community leaders to not just look at that gross data where it says you've lost 3% of your population, 4% of your population, but to really dig down and find out how many working age adults have we lost? How many 20 to 54-year-olds have been lost? And as you can see, it's a significant portion of that particular age group. This is a trend across the country. You can see that the darker purple is where they've lost 10% or more of their working age adults between 25 and 54. And you're going to see that almost all the counties in Illinois are at least a light lavender, if not the dark purple. And most of those dark purple, well, I would say pretty much all of them are in rural areas. So I'm going to talk a lot about the millennials. Some of this does work with the Gen Zers, but again, I didn't have a lot of new research. So until I have the research, I don't update the program. But let's talk about this millennial, which is between the ages of 26 and 41 right now, which they are the bulk right now of your working age population. They're adventurous, creative, they enjoy social contact. You may think they don't, but they really do. They like to talk with each other, not just on their phones. They are also considered the entrepreneurial generation by many researchers, and they are the victims of the Great Recession. Many of them came out of college with huge school debt that has yet to be repaid. And this has had an impact on that entire generation. I often give the example of when I left college back in 1984. You can go ahead and date me, do the math if you want to. But in 1984, I had $1,200 worth of school debt, school loans, just $1,200. Now it's an average of, say, I mean, you're lucky if you got out with 12,000. Many of these young people have $70,000 to $100,000 worth of school debt they're trying to work down, and it really has had an overall impact on this group. The other thing I want to talk about, and this is something that I hear a lot from especially business owners, especially business owners that are more my age, the baby boomer age, and they say that the millennial is lazy, that young people are lazy. And I'm going to say, no, they're not. In fact, I've seen a lot of super hard workers out there, but they do have a different attitude on work than what the baby boomers did. Baby boomers, we live to work. In fact, many of us are still working in our 70s and our 80s. I've looked at some research, and some of the psychologists think it was that commercial that the armed services put on that said, be all you can be. And I guess we're just never feel like we're done. But we live to work. We're the ones that created those latchkey kids. Well, those latchkey kids grew up and they're saying, no, we work to live. When they got out of college or even out of high school, they got out during the Great Recession. There were no jobs. So they weren't working just one job for 30 years, get a gold watch and a pat on the back. They've been working 1, 2, 3 jobs. They're the gig economy. And whether we like it or not, this is the way they were raised. This is what they came out. This is what they've been up against. So to expect them to be loyal to one job is a pretty tough thing. So remember that. They work to live. They don't live to work. Now, I'm not going to go over everything about the impact of COVID-19. This was a psychologist from Rockford, or a psychology professor from Rockford University, gave a wonderful webinar last July and talked about the impact of COVID-19. What I want you to look at is number 2, number 3, and down here at the bottom. 40% have outstanding student loan debt and typically spend close to half of their income on student loan payments. 22% of adults aged 23 to 37 were living with their parents as of March 2020. Now, 52% of young adults aged 18 to 29 are currently living with their parents. That is the highest level since the Great Depression. There is an upside to that, and that's the last line here. Many are working remotely, which would allow them to permanently relocate to rural areas if your internet services are dependable. We already talked about the research, so I'm going to skip this part, but I would like to thank Craig Schroeder again. He's the director of the Youth Engagement Center for Rural Entrepreneurship and did those 40,000 plus surveys that I said was the beginning of this program. Okay, what's the number one strategy? This shouldn't be a surprise to anyone on this call, okay? The number one strategy is internet, and I think all of us, especially community leaders, found out how important internet was in rural communities. The millennials consider internet a necessity. It's a staple. It's like having electricity. It's like having water. Internet is a necessity. It's the priority in most research. And actually, I will talk about a survey that I did at Jefferson County. It actually came in as number 2 in Jefferson County rather than number 1. But that's because the bulk of the people that completed the survey were in Mount Vernon, Illinois. And in Mount Vernon, the internet is pretty good. Now, it's not great, but it's pretty good. And so they didn't see that as their number 1. Now, think of all the things we do with internet. For the young working aged people, it's long distance learning opportunities, it's internet-based businesses, and what business didn't, try for an internet presence over the last year and a half? If they didn't have an internet presence, they probably aren't still open. And then finally, the remote work opportunities. I'm going to explain that a little bit more in a minute. One of the things I think, if you're in a rural area, if you do not know about this, I certainly encourage you to research it. NACO, the National Association of Counties, has what they call a tested app They had 1,362 reporting counties, but I believe you can still get involved with that Test It app. And you can see how much internet service you have if it reaches the FCC minimum. Now, unfortunately, of their 1,362 reported counties across the United States, 77% of counties under 50,000 have levels below, some of them far below the FCC minimum. The thing is if you want to attract young people and if you want to attract businesses, if you want to have telehealth, you need that internet. And I think it's important to have groups in your communities that are looking into this. Now, I know that it's not as easy as just snapping your fingers, finding a provider, and adding internet service. I know several of the counties in the state of Illinois are struggling. They have signed contracts, long-term contracts with service providers, some that are filing bankruptcy, some that don't have the opportunity to put the infrastructure in. You really don't see a lot of the cooperatives like they did with the electrical services where people in those communities can have more control. So I know how little control you can feel like you have, but I really feel that you need to do everything you can to get that internet up as high as you can if you're going to do anything in the area of attracting youth or, like I said, even attracting business or industry. Remote workers. Now, remote workers, I thought, could have been, even before the pandemic, was an opportunity for rural communities to attract especially the young people that had gone off to college from their communities, to try to get them back. They actually call them homecomers now, and I love that term. They're homecomers. This remote work gives them that opportunity. Even before the pandemic, there was a young woman who had moved home with her parents to pay off her student loans in Centralia. She was working for Cigna Insurance in St. Louis, and they allowed her to remote work. And she went in to work maybe one morning a week or one morning every other week for staff meetings. But then the majority of her work was already being done online. Now, Stanford University did a study, and they believe at least 54% of the population that's currently working remotely would like to continue that. And 75% want hybrid. Now, we do not know exactly how many companies are going to continue to allow this. But the predictions are 60% of companies will offer hybrid, 30% will be back in office full-time, and 10% will be fully remote. Now, I think that 10% is a little low for the fully remote because there were already a lot of remote jobs online that people could get. But we won't know until we get all the fallout, till everything's up and running and we know what's going on. But who are those remote workers? That's something that as a community planning agency, as a county, as a, your community leaders, your mayor, it's something that you need to look at. Who are the remote workers? Ask around. Is anybody working remotely? Are there any companies within 60 to 100 miles from your community that are going to allow that hybrid or fully remote work? This is a great way. One of the articles I was reading that was very good said that states now will compete to attract individual talent rather than trying to get companies to relocate that. And I believe that. I think remote workers are going to have the opportunity to live just about anywhere they want. And in a few minutes, I'm going to talk about why young people do want to come home. I think more people would like to come back to rural communities than we're actually aware of. Okay, strategy number two, invest in youth priorities. Okay, we mentioned that they love social contacts. They're business minded, but they love personal social contacts. They love outdoor amenities. And I know most of the rural communities that I've worked with in Illinois all can brag about an outdoor amenity that they have within a mile, 5 miles, 10 miles of their community. They want you to create third spaces. Third spaces are not home, not work, and they're especially important to remote workers. They're recreational opportunities for them to just hang out, play cards, listen to music, talk with their friends, like internet cafes, microbreweries, shared workspaces, all sorts of things. Now, and I saw this happen in a community, I'm not going to name the community, but they were coming up with an idea for a dog park. And there was no one under 70 on that little committee. And I was thinking, if you're really going to build something that's going to help you retain the youth that you have, and of course, when I talk about youth in rural communities, that's like 50 and under. We need to make sure that what we're building is what they want. And if you want to know what a millennial wants, just ask them. Just make sure they're on that committee. If you're building, you want to start up an internet cafe, or you're starting a microbrewery, or you're going to do a shared workspace, especially shared workspace. And if you're trying to attract those that can walk anywhere with their little laptop and their 6-figure plus salary, you definitely want to know what they want. Okay. It is difficult for us boomers who have been in positions of power within our community. We're on economic development committees and boards, but we really have to reach out and find out what these young people want if we want to attract and retain them. Okay, now I was talking about the importance of density when I was giving these programs before. The American Planning Association urged that these rural towns really take a look at that traditional town centers and walkable neighborhoods. And I'm seeing right now, this is just from my observations, this is not research based at this moment. I'm seeing that it does look like it's going back to that as the pandemic is sort of slowing down. But I do not have the facts on this right now for the after pandemic, because of course density is part of the problem with the spread of this disease. So, but I will check that out before I give my next programming, and I am looking for research on this. But right now it does look like they still would like to see walkable neighborhoods and traditional town centers. Millennials in your community and the younger people are great. They want that vibrant downtown, even if it's small. They realize they're in a rural community. They're not going to have higher expectations. They just want some of the things that they had when they were in the larger cities. Strategy 3, provide economic opportunity through entrepreneurship. As I mentioned, there have been study after study as to how entrepreneurial these young people are, or people under 40 are. 70% want their own business, 30% already have one, and 19% say it's their main source of income. They're starting businesses online. I see them going into downtowns. Petersburg, Illinois, has a cool center that's going on. It's going to be a restaurant. It's a young man he's not real young, but young, relatively speaking, coming back into the community and building this out because he believed in his community and he had the opportunity to do it. They want to live in communities that support their local businesses. That was one of the big pluses down in Nashville, Illinois, and Washington County when we were working on that plan, is they already had a culture of supporting their local businesses. I'm not saying millennials aren't going to shop at Walmart, but Walmart's not their first choice. They like the local small businesses. They like the local entrepreneurs. They also want entrepreneurial education, and the sooner the better. And anyone who has one of those CEO programs going on in their community, those have been very popular and very successful. And I think you're going to see a lot of things coming out of that. Now, whether these young people stay in your rural community or if they leave for a while and ultimately come back, it's still, they are very interested in that entrepreneurial education. So what are signs of an entrepreneurial culture? If you're looking at it from the outside, you're a millennial and you're saying, okay, is this an entrepreneurial culture here? truthfully, rural communities, some of them are already picking up on this. And there were some rural communities like Ottawa, Illinois, that actually increased the number of youth in their community. And a lot of it had to do with some of the things I'm going to talk about here. Public markets, farmers markets, pop-up shops, opportunities at local events where they can pop up and sell their goods, or artists can, shared workspaces, incentive dollars for small businesses. Buy local campaigns. I mean, buy local campaigns are very important to young people because they do like those supporting that local business. Marketing assistance, entrepreneur competitions, regional innovation centers, and business education, of course. So that's what they're looking for. Now, it may not be just the community, but some of the rural communities, you may not even realize how many resources you have. Business education may be available from the Regional Small Business Development Center or out at your local community college. You need to take a look at these resources and then hopefully publicize them to your to those homecomers. So it may be time for you to take a look at what you do have that's going to make people happy. This was a business in Nashville, Illinois, Print Crazy. I just do this to just kind of get a feel for how the younger generation works a little bit differently than some of the older generations. The CEO is Ashley. She actually started this business and owns the business. It's a print shop. They have a shared workspace, and I love their purple garage. But what they really do is they do a lot of decaling, I think that's how you say it, onto trucks. Their staff, a lot of them had gone to the St. Louis area, but they are actually just right north of Nashville, Illinois. If you're ever around, stop in. They do have a showroom there. It'd be great. But Nashville only has a population of 3,258. So if you can get a young person motivated in starting their own business in your rural community, take a look at this as a great example of how that can work out really well. I'm going to check my time here real quick. Okay, we're doing good. Now, strategy number 4, actively engage and consult youth. Some of you are going to recognize that this is Ken Williams, and I've got to get these names right, so please bear with me a minute. I got to get into my notes. Oh, here we go. Ken Williams, and hold on, I apologize. I should have been flipping these over. Here we go. Okay. The photograph is of Ken Williams, who's the mayor of Oregon, and Oregon's newest commissioner, Melanie Cozy. She's the commissioner of public property. Now, a couple years back, Ken and Terry Schuster, one of the other commissioners, actually, they were actually in another program that I was giving in Oregon, Illinois. And we were talking about developing a creative economy. We were talking about actively engaging youth. And I talked about, if you want to know what they think, just ask them. And the fact is that they want to know that their opinions and ideas matter. You want to make sure they know that you want them to stay or return, and to include them in community planning and local government. And I had been encouraging people to do this. Well, Terry Schuster and Mayor Williams went out and did just that. They actually encouraged Melanie to run for commissioner. Melanie, I know she's under 30. And she's also a CPA. So they kind of got some great things going here because she's got a great financial background as well. But this is such a great thing. I've seen other like organizations like the Business and Professional Women's Organization in Centralia, Illinois. Their board members decided to allow some of the younger people to get involved in events and planning new events and getting on the board. And it just completely re-energized that whole organization. In fact, now they're one of the largest chapters in Illinois. So the thing is that young people have a lot to offer. And we're talking, when I say young, we're still only talking like maybe 45 and under. They have a lot to offer, but you need to ask them to get involved. Okay, that isn't the way they do group think. They're not that highly competitive. They're not going to step out of that comfort zone. Some of them will. I mean, you can't blatantly say that for everyone, and they also need to be given a chance. If there isn't an opportunity for them to become a commissioner, is it an opportunity to become part of a committee? Say a committee that's working on the opportunity to do a park downtown or pocket parks, and let them come up and generate these ideas that'll not only be attractive to them, but they're also attractive to the boomers. I have yet to find an idea that a young person came up with that didn't make the boomers happy too. I mean, I like internet cafes. How about you? I like microbreweries. How about you? If you're over 65 and you look at this and say, okay, what do we want? Yeah, you want more public transportation. So do young people. You want more, telehealth and better health care. So do young people, and we need those young people in order to have that health care. That's the important part. Okay. So anyway, that is strategy number 4. That is to actively engage and consult these youth. Strategy number 5, this is my last one, and we're going to talk about a few other things, and we'll take a look at those questions as well. And this is actually marketing your community to attract younger people. You need a marketing plan. Now, I'm not saying you're going to do every single one of these strategies, but you need to take and consider each one of them and what kind of impact it can have on your community. I know we're all limited by resources, whether it's dollars, whether it's time, whether it's people. But back to what Dr. Merritt said, this is important. It's important to retain, and don't forget about the talent you already have and the young people you already have in your community. Get them involved as well. But to attract some of those homecomers back could make a huge impact on things. So, does your community have a marketing plan geared toward attracting young people? Make sure you know that millennials like news, but it's digital and short. Newspapers and TV won't reach them. Market your small business friendliness, market your natural amenities, market your lower cost of living, and hopefully market your access to broadband once you get that worked out. And peer-to-peer recommendations, starting and working with people, younger people, to make sure that they're making the recommendations. They can find friends and family members that come live here campaign. I actually think that Oregon also, and I don't want to keep talking about Oregon, but I know that they have taken this very, very seriously, just like the previous mayor in Ottawa. They're out there, they're trying to find out, and I think they even developed some videos to help promote their community, not only to older citizens, but definitely to those younger citizens as well. And Oregon is in a very beautiful place. But like I said, I can't think of a rural community in Illinois that isn't just a hop, skip, and jump away from a really nice natural amenity. Okay, so why do these homecomers return? Keep this in mind. The number one reason millennials return home is to raise their children. That's the number one. They feel they have better and safer schools in rural communities. They know their friends and neighbors. Their children have the opportunity to play sports where they wouldn't in a larger community. And something that's not on this list, but I found out in 2018, February 2018, I was in Chicago, and I did not realize that it actually costs about $24,000 a year just for childcare for one child in Chicago. Now, think about that, how much money they can save if they return home, if they can remote work, if they can do hybrid, they can come home and then they have mom and dad, grandma and grandpa that might be around to help them with the children. I'm reading now, this is new, coming right out of this pandemic, because there is a huge migration going on of young people right now, those under 40, those that can remote work. I think some of you may have heard of the one where a lot of people, especially the techies, are coming out of San Francisco and moving to Austin. They are driving up real estate prices right now. So, you know, there can be some unintentional consequences. That's what one of my colleagues keeps reminding me. But it is very important. But right now they're saying they're ready to exchange prosperity for a more rooted life. They miss the rural community. And there's a lot more of them who would like to come home, but there's things that rural communities have to do to make it possible. There's also another group. There are opportunities for volunteer or to be part of a larger mission. This is actually a quote. They want to fight rural poverty, restore local food systems, fight the opiate epidemic. They want to find meaning in their life, and they see that there's an opportunity for them to do this in their rural hometown, and they'd like to do it. And I'm here to say, and I want to just put this in, I'm going to put this in the chat box when we get to the questions and answers. But Steve Wald, I think he's on this call or on this Zoom presentation. He sent me an email telling me, and this is for, well, it's for everyone, but it's really the American Connection Corps is part of lead4america.org. It's lead, the number 4, america.org. And they have a group of fellows that they're trying to find to focus on broadband issues. Between now and June 15th, they're looking for 50 fellows to be placed in 12 states, including Illinois. Now, this is a great opportunity, but it's also something that if you're in a position in a rural community and you're thinking about, okay, I want to start a group and help bring people back, or we really need some help with our broadband, what do we do? You might want to take a look at this, lead4america.org. And also it's called American Connection Corps, CORPS. And Nancy, if you remind me, I will put that information in that email. I'll send it to you so you can put it into the email to everyone tomorrow that has the PDF of the program and the recording. Okay, so the thing is I want you to know young people want to come home. They want to come home. Many of them want to return. So let's just make sure we're doing what we need to do to attract them or retain them. Now, this is a millennial survey, and as I mentioned, there's things we're not going to do today, but this millennial survey I helped develop in 2016, I believe. We did it in Washington County and we did it in Jefferson County. This is the results, the infographic of Jefferson County, and it's pretty interesting stuff. I'm not going to go through it all. You're going to see that the minute we put this survey out there, we had 298 millennials between the ages of 20 and 35 at the time take this within 30 days. This was all done within about 30 days. I worked with the economic development director, John Hallberg. He was marvelous. They had so much of an interest in this that they were all ready to tell you. Like I said, you want to know what they think? Ask them. We found out that what they really like, and this actually went along with a lot of the research, they really like downtown living, regardless of where they are. They want loft apartments and condos. And then their second choice were the 3-bedroom homes in the country. And finally, a subdivision with a mix of housing options, apartments, small and large homes. So let's say you're doing housing and you want to know what working age adults want. Well, this survey could help. Now, I do have a couple of colleagues actually, who are probably on this call, I hope. And they are planning on, we are possibly going to be trying to do this survey at least statewide. If not, try to get a grant and do it throughout the Midwest to where perhaps we can supply some of this information to the counties. Getting good rural data in Illinois is really tough. So sometimes you just have to go out and do it yourself. But this really could be helpful. And if you want to do this survey, I do have the template of the survey available that you can copy into your own survey software and do it for your own community or your own region. If you're interested, I'm also looking at the possibility of doing some more millennial focus groups, or excuse me, I may have to change that to young adults because it's really Gen Zs and millennials if we're looking 20 to say 45 years old. But we're looking at doing some focus groups just to find out what is going on in Illinois right now after the pandemic. So my two colleagues are Mike Delaney, he's an educator in Northwestern Illinois, and also Joseph Maluwal, who is going to be giving a program next week, I believe, on hope. And it's going to be a great program. But anyway, we're working on this. We'll see what we can do. But if you want to do the survey yourself, you've got someone who can put that into software and get collected for your county or region, you just feel free to email me. Now, what's the next steps? I'm going to go through this quick. We'll go to the questions. The first thing is you need to discuss a community vision that's inclusive of all. You need to start thinking who's at the table when you start making decisions on how to attract and retain people. We select a strategy or two. Like I said, you don't have to do everything. Keep everything in mind, but you might want to focus on just doing a marketing campaign or trying to build entrepreneurship or trying to start a public market that will help everyone. We talked about the millennial surveys and focus groups that you can give. Develop action plans and implement them, obviously, and make sure you have young people involved, not just in the implementation, not just in the action. They need to be involved in the planning as well. And assistance from the University of Illinois Extension, we have educators and regional specialists and state specialists all over the state. Some of us, most of us actually, are very good at community participatory planning. And so if you're looking for someone to help you build this plan, please make sure you give us, send us an email, talk to us about it. And as far as I mentioned in the first place is that I will start doing programming the end of July in person. I could possibly give this to your county board, to an organization in your county, or even if it was a regional thing, I'd be happy to do that. If it's too far away, then you'd probably get me via Zoom as you are today. But there's much more we can do, more direct things with your community. If you want to find out more about University of Illinois Extension, Nancy, would you do me a favor and put our CED website or a link to that map that shows the educators and specialists we have all over the state? I'd appreciate it if you could look that up and throw it in the chat box. Okay, now, Linda, did you want to come back on, and are we ready to, I'm sorry, Laura, thinking of Linda Trigresser. Laura, Laura, okay, if you're on, and Nancy, do you want me to record through the questions or do you want me to stop recording now?
We'll also be recording for the Q&A.
Okay, I'm going to stop mine right now if that's okay.
No worries. Sounds great.
Okay. And we've got a chat box. Laura, have you been watching this? You can.
There are a lot of comments and questions, Pam, so I'll just get started.
I'm ready.
Okay.
I'm ready.
So there was a question about you using the 20 to 54 for working age. And they said they were used to seeing 25 to 64 to allow for education attainment to be set through retirement age. And they were just wondering why you were using that 20 to 54 age range instead.
The 20 to 54 is what's defined in a couple of research-based articles as working age population. They're saying if you're attracting working age population, they're going to be between 20 and 54. At 54, if they were to move into your community and take a job, generally they're looking more towards the next step of their lives with retirement. So that's coming out of the studies. It is confusing, and I'm sorry, I probably should add a slide to talk about this, because you've got millennials who are 25 to 41. You've got Gen Zers who are 24 and under. You've got working age population that's 20 to 54. And then you've got census data that breaks it down even differently. So across the board, what I'm looking at are 20 to 45-year-olds. Those are the ones that are not only going to come into your community to say, take a position, but they're also going to probably have small children, so that you're going to have more people in more children in your schools and things like that. They're more in a position to buy a new home, things like that. So yeah, it is a little confusing, and I apologize for the confusion, but hopefully that answers the question.
Pam, there were a few comments about broadband. So someone said broadband is everything. Test IT app is still up and running and collects data, and they were suggesting to use that to check speeds. Someone else mentioned that there's no comprehensive way to measure the availability and quality of internet services. Congress, maybe in a recent bill, has addressed that, but it'll take years for them to catch up with that. So just some comments about the need for understanding the broadband system in rural areas better.
Okay, actually, I want to interject that test IT, for the person who said that it was difficult to get that, take a look at that test IT. NACO is one of the organizations. That's exactly what they're trying to do. The FCC is doing a very poor job. The way they do it, as far as trying to figure out what kind of broadband strength that you have, where you're at with your broadband, that test IT is, or test it, that is really important, because what that is it's people using an app on their phone, and that the phone is actually, the smartphone is actually able to determine the strength and the quality of that broadband. So definitely, if you're interested, check that test IT out and see if you can't start to promote that in your area. Because when I looked at the map, I noticed a lot of rural counties in Illinois are not even using test IT, and they need to. They need to, so we know where the weak spots are. Thanks.
Thanks, Pam. There was a comment about honest conversations at the state level about how unappealing the state of Illinois is for multiple reasons. But then someone else said that they are a transplant from California who now lives in rural Illinois. And she said most people she knows, including herself, they don't care about state politics. And she said that from her, not a single person in her circle outside of the state of Illinois has any sort of negative association with the state of Illinois. So I think they're saying, she was saying that negative association that folks think of in Illinois is within Illinois and not necessarily outside of Illinois. And she said if a place offers decent employment and low cost of living, they will come.
Yep, I'm gonna agree with her on that. We have a lot of negativity about ourselves in Illinois. In fact, I had a graduate student that did a survey, and I was really dismayed at how some rural people describe themselves in this survey. It's like, it's not like that. I lived in Mount Vernon, Illinois for the last 5 years. I mean, I'm not a millennial, obviously, but people would think, oh, well, you don't have any shopping. And oh yeah, I had almost as much shopping, the same types of stores, but just on a smaller basis as they do here in Springfield. In fact, Springfield's losing a lot of shopping right now. So I think rural communities in Illinois in general have a tendency to put ourselves down, but we're really not as bad as we think. I think that is just maybe it's just bad PR. I don't know, but you're right. I appreciate that you're being able to give me both sides of the coin. So keep going, Laura. You're doing this all on your own.
Someone said they strongly agree with ask them what they want. When you mentioned that, they said that part of the research on this shows that youth want to be in places where they have opportunities to be involved, and asking them what they want to be part of is what makes a community attractive.
Yes, yes, it does. And it can really help grow. And that's what's going to make them stay. They're not going to stay if they can't be involved. I had someone in a community in central Illinois that said, oh, well, you know, we're trying to get young people to help us with these events. Well, the thing is you have 4 or 5 people all over 70 sitting in a room again, deciding what's going to happen with this event. And then you think these young people are just going to come in and they're going to set up chairs and set up tables and do all the heavy lifting. No, they want to be a part of the planning and the decision making. We have to remember that, let's see, 50 years ago, probably less than 10% of the female population had a college degree. Now women make up 51% of college education. And you've got all of these young people who are college educated and they're intelligent. And even those that aren't, they're still probably better educated with a high school diploma than they might have been 60 or 70 years ago. So what it is they don't want to just be the ones doing the grunt work. They want to be part of that planning. And if you want them to stay, become part of that community and get involved. Now, it doesn't mean they won't put up chairs or move tables. It doesn't mean they won't do the grunt work. They just want to make sure that they are included. And of course, that is a little bit about the way the millennials grew up. They are very different. They like group work. I think the boomers are very competitive. I think Gen Xers are pretty competitive too. The millennials are not as competitive. They see the power in groupthink. So, and that's research-based information, by the way. That's not just my my opinion. That's what the researchers are saying. And why it's more difficult to motivate these young people is because they are better, they have more education, they're better educated, and they want to be involved.
Pam, I'm going to just pause for a moment. Nancy, if you could put the poll up, we're starting to lose participants. We're getting close to the 1 o'clock mark, but I believe Pam is willing to stay on and continue conversations, and we'll continue to go through some questions.
Yes.
So if folks are willing, or if you're interested and have the time, please feel free to stay on with us and we'll continue going. But I did want to get that poll question up so that folks had an opportunity to answer that before you log off.
Sure. Thanks.
Sorry, Pam, I'm going to keep going.
Nope. Whatever you want me to do.
This person says, I hear boomers, I hear millennials, I hear Gen Z. What about Gen X? Where do they fall? Closer to boomers or millennials? And someone right after that, someone said Gen X is the forgotten generation because we never spoke up, just kind of skipped along through life, nothing notable.
Well, for the Gen Xer, the research that I had talked about, and the reason I did not include Gen Xers was because the Gen Xers actually got out of college at a very good time, way before the Great Recession. And the majority of them, believe it or not, in the studies that I've read, actually make more money than the boomers. On average, Gen Xers make more money than the boomers and a lot more money than the millennials who miss that get out of college, get a job, and start working your way up. You know, so that's why I'm really not, Gen Xers are not the forgotten generation. It's just they had a lot more going for them when they got out of school and out of college and had an opportunity they had less student debt. They were able to buy homes sooner. They make higher salaries, like I said, in comparison even to the generation before them, the boomers. It's the millennials and after, and of course now the Gen Zers, the even younger ones, have been impacted by this pandemic. We have no clue what's going to, you know, where that's going to go because so many of them lost so much education. Yeah, that's actually, you're not forgotten, Gen Xers. Actually, all in all, based on the research and studies, you're very, very lucky in relationship to the two generations that come after you.
So there was a comment and a follow-up, Pam. So someone said, is anyone familiar with the British show Escape to the Country? I wonder if a riff on that program might be a useful marketing tool, assuming that rural communities will have desired amenities. A marketing video must include local funky places. Can the municipalities heavily subsidize a few of these in a new dense downtown to include in such a video?
Sounds good. Yeah, actually, there is a lot of, I've read a lot of articles from, especially from Great Britain, the United Kingdom, the UK. Their rural populations, their rural communities are facing a lot of the exact same issues that we are today here in the United States. So yeah, if they're doing it in the UK, there's no reason why we couldn't try it here. And that could be good. But I like what you were saying, or whoever said it, about showing what the funky things are, but showing how they get millennials involved, showing the events they have, showing the cool amenities, natural amenities they have, the parks, the art, whatever resources you have. And that's why I think the planning, that community participatory planning, pulling everyone in together before you start making these decisions, could be really critical too.
There was a comment about health insurance and childcare, some of the issues facing young entrepreneurs, particularly those engaging in agriculture. And then there were a number of responses to that about childcare availability and the cost, specifically in Southern Illinois. And there are many areas where there's no access to childcare. And someone mentioned that's a good business opportunity for someone.
Yeah, and that's a lot of the reason why these young people want to move back to the rural communities where they came from, is because they might have mom and dad there to do some of the childcare for them. I mean, that is a really big thing, because childcare overall, that's a huge issue. I mean, I haven't gotten into it that much, but I've read some of the research, and that is a problem going on across the country. We really need to take a look at that and how we can do that. But it's definitely a driver.
Someone said, perhaps if all persons would gain an interest in their local and state politics that directly affect everything we do, things might begin to change in our state. Ideas of how to get them more involved?
Yeah, we've been talking a lot about youth leadership, and I think that that's important for anyone. Leadership classes for all generations are really important. How do you get involved? How do you lobby your politician? How do you sit down and have a discussion with them? How do you, create a community? I think so. The first thing is, I've lived a lot of places. No moss grows under my feet. And I love Illinois. I mean, I love the cornfields. I love downtown Chicago. I lived in Mount Vernon. I love Mount Vernon. I helped them start a community garden, and we had hundreds of people come together. I think that, it's kind of like on an individual basis. I think we have to learn how to love ourselves and to really appreciate what we have. And I think some people in Illinois have a difficult time doing it. And it's sort of a culture. It's sort of built in, But no, like I said, I've lived in a lot of different places. And I went to Wisconsin back in, what was it, the early 2000s. You want to see high personal taxes, go to Wisconsin. I mean, you really have to take a look before you continue to judge what we don't have here in Illinois.
Pam, there was a comment about some success. It says, we have a millennial group now called the Keystone Group, and they've been in existence for over 2 years. Our Chamber of Commerce and Main Street organization work with them as their advisory contact, and 2 of the group members are now on the city council.
Wow, what does she say? Or he say which
Nope.
Community they're in?
Chris, if you're still here and you want to let us know, that'd be great. Oregon has had a lot of entrepreneur.
I am. here, and it's actually due to the workshop we did in 2019 with the University of Illinois Extension, retracting and attaining millennials.
Yes.
You came out to Sauk Valley Community College and spoke.
Yes.
And we had a keystone, we had a millennial panel. Do you remember that after the presentation?
Yes, yes.
As part of, so from that, we've started that millennial group, now the Keystone group. We're about 50 to 80 strong. We have an advisory group of them, and 2 of those ran for city council. So we're here in Sterling, Illinois, kind of the Sauk Valley area.
Well, they actually want to do an impact case study on this particular program. Could I have your name and your name, and then I'll look you up so that we can contact you, Chris? What's your last name?
I'm Chris Noble, and I'm the executive director of the Sauk Valley Chamber.
Yes, you're the one that invited me. Okay.
Yeah, and so you were willing to do your presentation, then we added on a panel of our millennials that had moved to the area or come back home, and we are still going strong. So it was a great, conduit for conversations that need to be having. Now this group they did the dog park in 6 months. They raised $60,000.
Oh my gosh.
They have a dog park in town, 2 on city council. One of them is on my board of directors. Some good stuff because they are a voice.
I will have someone give you a call to describe that so the extension can go ahead and write that. You've made my day. So everyone, that's why I said, if you're interested in me giving this program, this is a great way to start. And yes, Chris, you are responsible for developing the companion program, that millennial panel that we started to do. So thank you very much for that. And thank you for that, that feedback on impact. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. Like I said, anybody that wants to jumpstart it, we did it as a lunch and learn. We had about 35 participants, and it was great information, and the panel was just another component, and it was a conduit for just moving forward.
Oh, thank you. I am so happy. I am so glad, and I'm glad for that area. I actually lived in that area at one time, so congratulations, Chris. That's excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much. Oh, Laura, keep going. This is fun.
What recognition for the work you're doing, Pam.
Oh, yeah. Well,
so Oregon has had a lot of entrepreneurial activity for high schoolers and recent grads. They have several office spaces dedicated to their wares and services they offer. They've also done a lot of public service work. And so I was able to work with a group of around 20 students that helped get the word out about the 2020 census. It was a great experience to work with all of them and listen to their ideas and then realize the results.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Oh, wow. This is great.
So someone else said rural communities will have to embrace diversity to keep more young people. Gen X here who returned to rural areas to raise Gen Z children. The Gen Z children are more diverse and need to see that their communities reflect them and embrace them.
Yes, yes, definitely.
Someone did put a couple links in for the Lead for America program that you discussed.
Oh, thanks. Hopefully that was Steve Wald. I appreciate that. He may have had to leave this the workshop. Okay.
Intertown community transportation alternatives are very important to open the door to non-computer or white collar jobs, manufacturing industries in smaller rural communities. High school did not offer driver's ed. High school graduates do not all have driver's ed. There's not public transportation alternatives to open the door to opportunities in other communities.
Well, then maybe they need to get some committees together that include younger people to come up with solutions for these problems that they're having. I think each community, each rural community it has its own way of doing things. That's why sometimes it's a little easier getting those homecomers to come back to the community they came out of. But you need to utilize them because remember, they've been out in the world in other communities, in larger communities. They see what's out there and they can come up with some really creative new ideas on ways we can do things and provide these services in these rural communities. So definitely get them involved.
Okay. Well, my hubby and I are Gen Xers. We moved to a town of 2,200 for many of the same reasons listed in your PowerPoint. We have the purchasing power of the boomers, but we have kids in the local district and the millennial desire for broadband, public markets, and more options to stay in town rather than drive to a neighboring large town.
Great. Great. Thank you for the validation. I appreciate that.
Let's see. Ironically, there are ag areas that are food deserts. Aside from the desire for local business, is there demand for actual local supermarkets, grocery stores?
The supermarket grocery store is tough. That's a question I'm actually doing some research on right now. The thing is, you know, with Walmart and Dollar General, it's very difficult for your traditional grocery store to survive. Their margins are so thin, but I think that this is a way we can look at things in a new perspective. When we look at farmers markets during the summertime, the wintertime, possibly, you know, because there's people that actually sell meat and vegetables and things like that. We need to look at new solutions for maybe old problems. And the best way to do that is to just get these diverse people together to talk about how we solve these problems. And the more youth you bring in, not only will they stimulate the entire community, but they'll also help stimulate that younger generation as well. But there's always new ways to do it. If we can't do a traditional grocery store, then maybe we need to think about, you know, just something where they can buy the vegetables and the meat. Because, you know, a Dollar General, in fact, I think, Western Illinois University has and it may be Dr. Merritt that does it. He has a wonderful program on how soon your grocery store will close after you bring in that Dollar General. And it averages around a year, I think he said. So, you know, if you've got a Dollar General and a Walmart, you're not going to probably get that traditional grocery store back. We're going to have to come up with some better ideas for rural communities.
I'll go ahead and plug. Dr. Merritt gave that presentation as one of the first in the series that Rural Partners and Extension did together. So that webinar recording would be available on the local government education website for folks to go and see.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
And Pam, just someone else responded to that comment about the grocery store. So they mentioned that Sean Park from Western Illinois University, who also works with Dr. Merritt, has successfully launched 2 co-ops with the support of local governments. Get in touch with him if you're interested in one for your community.
Yes, he is very good. He is, and thank you. I see it's in the chat box right now, so that's good. Sean Park, I've talked with him a lot. And yeah, if you're looking at how to do a cooperative to either save or bring back your grocery store, he would be your first step. Yeah, your first stop. Yes, definitely.
Pam, how do you see high schoolers fitting into the goal of engaging young people? What are good ways to reach them or invite them into a focus group too?
Yeah, you can. You know, young people, they're some are more focused than others. Some are more interested. I mean, you can find 13-year-olds who want to start a business. You can find 15-year-olds who want to run for public office. But in some cases, they're not interested. They're more interested in, you know, playing with their friends and, you know, skateboarding and things like that. But to definitely, if they want to be engaged, that's the whole point, is that these small exclusive groups that we've created in these small rural communities to make decisions for the entire community, we really have to start looking at what, well, the scholars call it vertically integrated governance. But what it really is you need to do this community participatory planning, and you need to get as diverse an audience. You know, you need to get young people, older people, and you need to talk about this and decide what you want to do in your community or your region. If you don't include them, you're not going to get the new ideas. And, you know, truthfully, doing anything like we did back in the 80s is not going to work in the 2020s. I mean, you know, yeah, it might be for some economic developers, for some community leaders, that might be our go-to, because that's what we've done our entire careers. But we've got to remember, we're not building this future for necessarily ourselves. We're building it for the younger generations, and we need to get their input if we want them to stay, if we want vital rural communities. I mean, how much can you lose? You lose your grocery store, you lose your bank, you lose this, you lose your school, and then do you really have a community? You know, it's time to open that up to everybody.
So someone commented, pre-COVID, I contacted several rural high school groups and had started focus groups. Things fell apart over the past year. I hope to restart this outreach in the fall when schools are in person. These kids love to have input and have energy and great creative ideas.
Fantastic. Who is doing that?
Carrie, Kerry, that's all I know.
Okay. Well, congratulations, Carrie. You keep up the good work. That's all I can say, or that's all I will say. That's great.
There's some comments about asking or including or them having a seat at the table is vital for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Diversity, equity, inclusion has to be a focus behind strategies for keeping young people involved. So a couple different comments there from folks with the same message.
Yes, yes, yes.
Someone said former Gen X, now a millennia old.
Okay.
Let's see. This Gen X has gone through 4 career changes and a layoff that required moving 3 states away and looking at another layoff at 53 years old. So a lot of challenges.
Yes, yes. Well, we do have those challenges throughout the course of our lifetime. That is for sure. Yeah, no, that's tough.
So when boomers were roughly the same age as millennials are now, they owned about 21% of America's wealth compared to millennials' 3% share today, according to recent Fed data.
Yep, that sounds about right. And that's a lot of that has to do with the student debt that I was talking about that they had that the others, we didn't have as boomers. So yeah, that's a tough one.
There was a comment on a population loss. It says a recent New York Times story discussed the young working professionals exodus to major metro areas. Illinois had a net loss. Ages were not identified. Big gainers were Dallas, Fort Worth, Atlanta, Miami, and other metro areas in warm climates. I was surprised at the Illinois loss numbers. Even Chicago had a loss. I didn't expect this.
Yeah. Yeah, you do. You're seeing some of that out migration. There are some very popular places around the world that if they can move, they will, especially around the United States. I think one of the most interesting migrations now is out of San Francisco, though. This isn't the first one. Someone reminded me there was one about 20 or 25 years ago when a lot of the people from San Francisco moved up to Washington State and Seattle. That was when, Starbucks started to become really popular. Might be more than 25 years. Anyway, yeah, but still, I do see people where they could be coming into Illinois, but you're going to see that most of the country has lost population. And that's not just out migration. They're not just moving. I read an article and I'm trying to remember it, but we had the lowest birth rate in the United States right now, the lowest birth rate than we've had for like the whole last century, I think. So we've got this really low birth rate and we've locked down immigration. And so without those two, we're not just losing population because they're moving out of state. We are losing population because we're not having children and we're not allowing immigration. And so we're going to continue to lose across the country, not just in certain states. We're going to lose across the country population. So there are other factors to take into consideration other than people just, moving out of Illinois.
Pam, there's several links to the Sauk Valley Keystone Group and some of the work they're doing. Folks are loving that idea. To me, it sounds like maybe a good future webinar topic. Yeah, just really good feedback on that. Someone said, don't forget your public library. They would be of great assistance and would love a seat at the table. Someone else said they're I am a Lead for America Fellow, if anyone has any questions, and she put her email address there. So if folks are interested,
fantastic. Thank you.
Find that comment. Someone said Polo just got its grocery store back.
Polo did? Good for them.
Jana with Sterling Main Street and Chris with the Chamber would be more than willing to provide an overview of how we move this project forward, the growing pains, lessons learned, and how we have impacted change. Again, that's the Sauk Valley group, and she included an email.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Giselle included an email for Sean Park with the Institute with the co-op, grocery store co-op. So thank you for doing that, Giselle.
Thank you, Giselle. Yes, yes. And I notice here, I moved from the Bay Area to Central Illinois. It's an easy comparison as far as quality of life goes. Okay, as I said, it's a lot to do with attitude and what perspective you have. I think this message that we keep giving out that nobody wants to come in Illinois, taxes are too high, we hate Illinois, that's a bad message. We need to get rid of that message. It's like that self-talk seminar that I went to once. It's what we tell ourselves is what we believe. If someone can move from the Bay Area to Central Illinois, and they feel that it's an easy comparison as far as quality of life, well, hey, those are the people that are moving to Illinois. We need to listen to them and find out what we can do more for them. Yeah.
Someone mentioned that UK program Escape to the Country can be found on YouTube if anyone's interested in learning more.
Okay.
Someone said we need to gently deal with the 70-year-olds who have run their community and feel they earned their right to be in charge.
Yeah, you do have to, first of all, there was a lot of competition for those 70-year-olds. They've worked hard to find and get their positions of power and leadership. And it isn't something that I'm expecting millennials to come in and, you know, bulldoze over and younger people take over and take away their town. That isn't it. It's all of us getting together and just taking, you know, those perspectives of everyone and then coming up with solutions that benefit us all. And, you know, it takes a little extra work, but in the end, it makes for a much happier and more inclusive community.
There's been a couple of comments about high school FFA programs and CEO programs through the Midland Institute and how helpful and great they are in communities. Couple comments about millennials. So millennials don't want to have kids because largely they cannot afford to. Student loans, childcare costs, and stagnant wages make it incredibly hard. And along with that, someone said, while attending a conference in Chicago, I sat at a table with a group of late 20s professionals. All were not planning on having children for the foreseeable future due to exorbitant educational debt, could not afford to buy a house and pay off loans. No kids.
Right.
Silent generation and baby boomers are reaching the last stage of life, so the death rate's increasing. Combining that with the declining birth rate, it is certainly contributing throughout the country. In Illinois, the primary problem are those moving out of the state. Someone said, I love Illinois, not a native. It's beautiful in the state and it offers so much to those who love the outdoors. I like that. And the next comment, building community is a shared responsibility. I think those are good notes to end on.
Yeah, they are. And I'm going to save that chat box because I want to go through and read it. I really appreciate all that input everybody's given. And thank you, the 51 of you who are still on. Thank you for staying. I think this wraps it up. Laura and Nancy, will you stay on for a minute afterwards so we know next steps? But otherwise, thank you so much, everyone, for participating and coming on today, and good luck with all your planning on this. Just let me know. I'm gonna flip this maybe.
And just a reminder that the webinar recording will be available on the local government education website. And if you had registered in advance, you'll be getting the PowerPoint slide and a link to that via email in the next few days.
Correct. And email me anyone that has questions.
You've had some really positive remarks in the chat box, Pam.
Wonderful. I am so glad for that. I'm just excusing myself for a second. Okay.
Have a good day, everyone.
Yes, thank you.